The Amazing Spider-Man 2 falls into the category of films that, as a storyteller, are the most distressing. The sequel had potential, and when examined through the right lens, reveals the kernels of a fantastic film that we just never saw. That being said, buried inside The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a good film. It seems unlikely, but I promise it's there. To understand the good parts of this film, we have to look past the metafictive of Peter's parents being S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. It just confuses things. Let's focus on the story being told. The inciting incident of the film is kind of Peter's parents dying, but again, we're pretending this doesn't happen at the start of the film, because we know it's Sony trying to sell Spider-Man 3. The real inciting incident of the film is that Peter must stop a truck robber from escaping, while keeping his girlfriend happy and making it to graduation on time. After some Spider-Manning, things complicate further when Peter breaks up with Gwen. This is Peter acting to solve his first complication. He can't balance being Spider-Man and Gwen, so he gives up Gwen, an early reversible decision that leads into the rising tension of the middle act. We're offered resolution to the first act, with Peter being mopey, and we're offered Oscorp's change of leadership, and Harry emerging. We don't necessarily need this in this film, but it adds to the runtime, so for now, for argument's sake, we'll keep it. Max is dropped inexplicably into some eels, and we see Electro born. Another decent complication that breadcrumbs us toward the rising climax of the middle act, which is cleverly coupled with the complication of Gwen and Peter deciding to be friends. It's an awkward few sequences, and I think this really builds on the tension. We expect a heartfelt resolution with Gwen, some kind of a closing between the two, but instead, she announces she's moving to England. We're held on this hook as Electro attacks, raising the stakes of the earlier complications of Peter's balancing act between saving the city and Gwen. Some great action follows. In a nice thematic coupling, Peter subdues Electro, but is unable to reconcile Gwen's decision. This leads to further complications as we reach the climax of the middle act. We're treated to some great cinema, in the form of Peter losing his mind about Gwen and his parents, through a pretty interesting montage, and his indecision effectively creates his participation in the Gwen issue. In this way, Peter not acting on Gwen leaving is his decision. We get a bunch more boring backstory that we don't really care about, and what should be our middle climax, Harry requesting Peter's blood to save his life, we just don't ultimately care about. Instead of a temporary resolution to the three ongoing conflicts in preparation for the final crisis, a narrative structure we all recognize, we instead get some unnecessary scenes with Max, and eventually more complications with Aunt May, and Peter has to decide between trusting his aunt or seeking the truth about his parents? This is where the film starts to fall apart. Gwen goes to her interview, which is good. The consequences of Peter's inactions are being revealed. Good storytelling. Harry goes mental and is duped from his company, which is fine I guess because we established previously we were okay having Harry in this film. Peter then goes to the secret subway platform to discover his father's research. It's a funny little moment, but it's totally out of place. The next sequence we should see Harry confronting Electro and helping him break out, which we do eventually see. This is the inciting incident of the beginning of our final crisis. It needs to come off the back of the Gwen crisis and lack of resolution. But instead, the scene we get with Electro comes off the back of the subway platform. This is basic storytelling that they sacrificed to make the next film work. At any rate, we get the heartbreaking final complication of the Gwen story, as Peter receives a voicemail from Gwen.
I'm on my way to the airport right now.
She's already left for the airport. And in fairness, Garfield's acting in the scene is phenomenal. We receive a great monologue from Gwen, amazing acting from both Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, and then the building climax at Oscorp as Electro escapes, which is fine. Those two go hand in hand. They are both the climax of the initial complication. Once again, things go ankles up as Harry goes into the super secret room of future villains and juices up. We don't need this weird suiting up scene. We don't need any of this. He doesn't need to be a villain. The I love you spiderweb scene should have followed immediately after the rising complication. That makes sense. It's Peter actively participating in his complication to solve it. Adding the goblin is just dumb. It's an artificial crisis, and whether or not they realized it when they were making the film, it doesn't sit right. Peter acts. He solves his final crisis by deciding that his life should be about Gwen. They ham up the scene a little bit with the CG, but it's still okay. The trouble, of course, is that we're coming off the back of the Harry scene, and we're distracted. We should be tearing up, but instead, we've spent nearly 40 minutes of screen time, with pointless Max scenes, and Harry being slick and rich. At this point, we're already bored. We're not crying, we're just confused. And then the city goes dark. We see the climax of the Max story that ties into the resolution of the Gwen story. This is also good. The stakes have been raised to the entire city, and we get some nice complication of planes going to crash, and some more artificial urgency that kind of works. It feels a little forced, but we'll take it at this point, because we need something to re-engage us. Though, again, just a reminder that at this point in the film, we're already bored. Spider-Man has a gorgeous chase sequence with Electro, and they eventually have their final fight at the power plant. Gwen puts herself in danger, and in some terribly scripted but amazingly acted scenes, decides she's going to help. Things get dubsteppy once again, and then, of course, the film falls apart during its ultimate climax. We get some really good action, and finally, by accepting Gwen and his love for her, we save the day. Credits. Except, there's still 20 minutes left of the film. This is where we see the Dumb Goblin and the Dumb Goblin fight. Great cinematography, and a great death. But we don't care. We watch Max stand in the elevator for 5 minutes. We've had a lot of scenes building up to this point, and we just spent the rest of the film gaining a resolution with Gwen Stacy, and then she dies. If we eliminate the unnecessary Max and Harry scenes, ditch the end Goblin fight, push the parents' plot way into the background, there's actually a good film in there. It could have been worse, of course. Mary Jane was supposed to be in this film and was cut out. Oh, and then there's the Rhino fight at the end. Just none of that, we don't need it. The complications ultimately build well, the inciting incidents to each act are interesting, and the stakes do continually rise, as Peter's life grows more and more complex and dangerous. There is so much good in this film, but it's ultimately a disappointing ride, and it's no wonder that Sony decided to sell the rights. Thanks for sticking around for the end of this one here, guys. Really appreciate your support as always, and all the Patreons over at Patreon who do God's work and help us continue to make videos. This one was kind of interesting for me because I'm not a big film buff, so I did do a bit of research into some film theory. So if you enjoyed, let me know. Let me know what your thoughts were on the Spider-Man 2 film. I know a lot of people had some problems with it. And as always, I'll see you next time.